Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. Lee Holdridge is a multi-Emmy award-winning and Grammy-nominated composer, known for his richly melodic scores for Splash, Mr. Mom. I forgot about that movie. I loved that movie when I was a kid. The hit TV series Moonlighting, another favorite, and Beauty and the Beast, as well as for his long-time collaboration with Neil Diamond on the Grammy-winning soundtrack to Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Born on March 3rd, 1944, in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, to a Puerto Rican mother and an American father who was a botanist and a climatologist. He began violin studies at age 9 under Hugo Mariani and later studied composition in Boston and New York. After being discovered by Neil Diamond, he moved to Los Angeles to arrange for him, and their collaboration on Jonathan Livingston Seagull marked the beginning of his Hollywood career. He's since composed for Splash, again, Mr. Mom, East of Eden, beautiful score for that movie, Moonlighting, and opera Dolce Rosa.
Mm-hmm.
He advises young composers to study the craft. You still need to learn how it's all put together. It's advice that echoes through every score he's written. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Jeremiah. It's great to be here. You're very complimentary. I appreciate that. You know, I when I was around 10, I started studying the violin, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
and I started rewriting my violin exercises. And my violin teacher at the time said, "Why do you do that?" And I said, "Because they're boring." He said, "I think you want to be a composer." And that's it. The light bulb went off in my head. And that's all I've ever done ever since then. I've composed music.
Well, you started violin, like you said, at age 10. And then by the time you turned 15, you were sure this is what you were going to do, right? You were going to be a composer.
By the time I'd already written quite a lot of music. And I was fortunate in high school. I was studying with Henry Lasker, who was a composition teacher. And I was learning the craft of composition early on. And it's like you open up the gates and off you go.
And why did the violin speak to you? I mean, you played the piano, you played the violin, but the violin, I think, had a stronger calling for you in the beginning, right? How did that inspire your first senses for musical composition over the piano?
It's interesting. The violin is a more of a linear instrument. In the orchestra, the violin often plays the melodic statements very often. And so you're drawn to that. And I think my desire to compose melodies drew me to the violin because I saw the violin, amazing singing voice, so to speak. Melody, I think, to be honest with you, is the hardest thing to come up with because it's kind of like you're naked, it's just a few notes and it either works or it doesn't work, And I literally, in listening to your intro about silence, to be honest with you, if I'm out walking or driving or whatever I'm doing, I'm hearing music in my head all the time. I hear it. I hear things. I think maybe I should go home and write that down. That kind of thing. And I've been known to, even nowadays with the iPhone, you have the little memo. I can sing into it. I have a terrible voice, by the way. Oh, that's interesting, and let me try that. So there's always music is in the universe. It's around us all the time, and it's in nature. I mean, look at all the great composers that were affected by nature and what they heard in nature, and composed based on it. I think it's something that affects all of us, and I was affected early on by that, and the violin was perfect because there it carried the tune, so to speak.
Across your work, the idea of place, location seems strong. Like, for instance, the forests in Costa Rica,
Yes.
Caribbean roots,
Yeah.
landscapes that you score for, do you hear a place in your music?
Well, you can sometimes. It's very important. In some films, that will color the score. You know where it's located, if it's urban or if it's in the country or whatever, or if it's on the ocean. Um, what a couple of times when I've scored movies that had airplanes in them, like World War II films, I noticed that a lot of the engine sounds were in B major.
Wow.
In the key major. So you tend to say, well, I better write the cue in B major so the cue will fit, the music will fit the airplane,
Interesting. That's so.
come in handy, so to speak. And sometimes when the airplane flies past you, that Doppler effect, as they call it, it goes down to B flat. So sometimes, depending on the angle of the plane in the movie, you had to pick a key that fit with it.
Something I
In
never would have thought about. But
well,
you hear it. You hear the
well, you
engine
do
in
hear.
B.
Yeah, you hear it when when you're watching the film for the first time and you're studying, you're sitting with the director, and you're talking about what you're going to do for a score. In the movie The Tuskegee Airmen, I there's a great scene where Lawrence Fishburne, who plays the lead, flies his first solo, and he goes up in the airplane for the first time alone, and it's the engine sound because it's a World War II fighter plane, and I'm listening to the cue, and I'm designing the cue around the key of where the engine is in the perspective of the film, so that there won't be a clash, and it fits very beautifully.
Oh, I have to go
What?
back and watch that scene. Well, many composers talk about inspiration like flowing, as you just did in the beginning there when you're out on a walk and you're in
Yeah,
the forest or you're out in nature, you can hear things and then you get inspired and it's sort of
right.
flowing through you and to you. And then I did, my research. I read a couple articles where you've really, over your career, emphasized and talked about the importance of the craft, like studying harmony, counterpoint, orchestration. How do you
Mhm.
balance that spark of inspiration that you get and then take that inspiration home in your iPhone, in your notes app, and apply the discipline of craft?
It's very important to have the tools to work with so you can build the house, so to speak. Uh, I think if you were going to be a carpenter and you're going to build a house, it would be good if you knew how to measure things and what tools to use and why does this beam support this beam, and you know the reasons for those things. Why were certain things done that are amazing from a geometrical standpoint? Music is the same. You can do a lot of it with instinct, and there are a lot of composers that compose solely on instinct. But I think if you're going to try to be diverse and do a lot of different things, I think it helps to know what the possibilities are, what the different tools do. And a lot of that comes from studying other composers' music, the great classics and contemporary colleagues. You listen to what they did and they say, oh, that's interesting. Listen how that works. Listen what that does. And often you go to the score and you look at it and say, oh, I see why it does that sound. You can look at it. Uh, Listen, I can look at a score by a student these days, and I know on the first page they either know what they're doing or they don't know what they're doing. You see it immediately. You see it immediately. You see the voicings. You see everything. I had a colleague once who was a great keyboard player, and he didn't understand why his cues didn't sound the same on the orchestra. And I looked at the score and I said, "That's because you're writing piano parts. You're pounding on the keys. The orchestra doesn't pound the keys. The orchestra plays linear movement." I said, "You have to think that way to write for an orchestra. It's a whole different ballgame." And
So there's
so,
there's a bit of patience in writing music. There's a little bit of in the craft side of it.
yes, yeah. I think it's important. Now, it's like a language. After a while, you know it so well, you don't think about it. You just do it. Nobody asks the centipede, "How do you keep track of all your legs?" He just walks. So It's the same thing. Once the craft is part of your language, it's just there. It becomes instinct almost. I instinctively sometimes, if I'm doing something, I instinctively know, oh, this should go this way, or this should, you know those things. You immediately get a sense of what you should do. It's very helpful. And then other times you say, I'm going to break that rule. I'm not going to do what the rules say. There, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to jump a different interval, or I might do a different thing. But it's good to know why you're doing that. Why are
Mhm.
you breaking? And it's very helpful. And
It's that foundation that you need to call on and to
yes,
rely on and to
yes.
stand on. So
Ignore.
you don't ignore. With that idea in mind for your career, which has been more challenging, finding that idea, that inspiration, or refining that idea?
Finding the idea is a big challenge, the spark that ignites something, but the hard work comes after that. Once you've got that idea, now you got to figure out what to do with it. And
Mhm.
that's heavy lifting comes in. I can't tell you how many writers and composers and novelists and everything, they all tell you it's all, 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. I've heard that quote over and over and over again. I said, absolutely, absolutely. That's all it is. And people talk about the great classical composers. They were just working guys. They were either writing for the church or they were writing for some royal palace or something. They were just doing gigs. They were writing stuff. And they were just doing it, and they were just doing it, and a lot of that stuff emerged, so to speak, and some of it's been forgotten, and some of it's been remembered. You can't judge that. You don't know what's going to emerge and what's going to be forgotten. It's just one of those amazing, curious things that the universe does to an artist's work.
Mhm. I like that. Well, I talked about in the beginning that magical moment in a theater when there's that everybody's rushing in, they're anticipating a great film. Then it gets silent as the lights go down and dim, and it almost feels like the audience holds its breath a bit
Yes.
before that. Your first note,
Yeah.
let's say we're in a movie that you've scored, before
Right.
your first note plays, there's that fragile space between the silence and the sound.
Absolutely.
It's so magical, right? Because it's coming and you're just waiting, and
Well,
and the music sometimes comes first. And how would you describe that moment?
well, I like to cite an example from our classic recent literature, the movie Jaws. I was sitting in the audience when that first, I saw like maybe the third night of it or something like that. And when that music started, you could feel the entire audience, the adrenaline in that room chill the audience out. And I'm looking at the screen, I said, all you're seeing is the bottom of the ocean, sand and water, stuff you've seen in a Jacques Cousteau documentary. There's nothing new there. It was the music that got to the audience, not what they were seeing. When they heard those notes, they went, "What? What's?" It terror struck the audience. So
I was like 9 or something. I was doing it, or maybe even younger, and I had to take swim lessons. And that movie came out, and the swim instructor could not get me off the dive board. I would look down at the water, and I could hear. And if I jumped in the water, I could hear that soundtrack.
they
How
say a lot of
powerful!
swimming after that movie came out. Yeah. But amazing. The subconscious is so powerful when you think about it, and in that works in our favor. Us composers, it works in our favor because we get to be inside that subconscious sometimes. How many times have I had a director say to me, "Oh, don't play what's on the screen. Give me something else. I want a counterpoint to it." And it's fascinating when they tell you that because you suddenly say, "Wait a minute, what does he mean? What counterpoint? What counterpoint?" And I love moments like that. Maybe you're not playing what you're seeing; you're playing something else.
So
So,
you like to manipulate people and their
well,
emotions. You like to
it,
play with it a little bit. I could
way
see that being fun.
the great horror scores, film scores, really play with people's minds.
Yeah,
But like I said, Jaws is a classic opening of a film that just scares the daylights out of you. And there's nothing, you're not seeing anything.
that's what they did so brilliantly. The music and that you just it was just a little bit out of sight, right? And you fear that.
Yeah.
I think that was brilliant. I wish more horror movies did that. Alfred Hitchcock did that really well. Just
Yeah.
the anticipation or the imagination can be of
Well,
an
that
audience can be so powerful.
he started that. He was kind of the master of that. There was a moment, the TV series Beauty and the Beast. I love the music to that. We had a great time. I worked with a couple of other composers because we had to do 20 minutes of music every week for live orchestra. So it was a lot. It was a lot of writing. So after a while, couldn't work alone. We had to have a couple of other guys working on it. But one of the things that when I was first working on that series, I couldn't come up with a theme. I was working on the pilot film, the 2 hour film, and I was having a rough time. I had written all the scary stuff and all the tension stuff, but I needed this beautiful love theme, and it just wasn't coming. It wasn't coming. I was just like panicking. There was a scene
No.
towards the end of the pilot where Linda Hamilton, who's now been healing down below New York City, she was injured by an attacker, and she's now healing, and now she's getting ready to go back up to the upper level, to the real life. And there's a scene where there's a portal where they under the building where it goes out to the street, and it's a long kind of old broken down hallway, and you see the street, the light way out in the distance. And they shot it where she turned around slowly and started walking down that hallway, and it was so beautiful watching her walk slowly. You see it towards the end of the film, and I was looking at that. All of a sudden, it hit me emotionally, and I went over to the piano and started playing a few notes, and there was the theme, And it was just because that visual of her, that solitary walk down the hall, leaving the safe environment to who knows what's ahead, uh, out on the street, it just got to me.
Mm.
So you never know what's going to trigger it in you, but the theme came from that, and then I stayed up all night and did all the versions of the theme that I had to do for the film.
Lee, was that the main theme that you're referring to?
Yeah, and you heard it at the beginning of the show every week, and I did I did win a Grammy for that score. I mean, an Emmy for that score. So
That's
that was great.
beautiful. We played coming into this segment here with you. We played
Mhm.
that at the beginning, so that's what I'm just for the audience. I want them to know that's what we heard.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just a few notes, but man, it did it.
it gets you. Did it?
You
Did
just
it
need.
get you? Did it get? Did it? That emotion that you felt when you watched that scene, and then you went to the piano. When
Yeah,
you after you finished the score and you saw it in the show and you heard it afterwards, did you capture that emotion you felt, that pain, or
I
that?
felt I did feel it. It did capture it. It was
Yeah,
very very.
I
I
did
remember
too.
putting it. You know.
I think you cut out on me there, so I didn't hear what you just said.
Uh, Put it on an oboe.
I'm sort of fascinated. I know I keep going back to this, but that silence and then sound
Yes.
metaphor. And there's a quote that I'm sure you've heard that says, "Music is the space between the notes." When you go and sit down at the piano, before you play a single note, is there anything that you hear in the silence before that moment, before that key is struck? Is the room empty or is it full of potential sound?
Ideas have come to me all kinds. Sometimes, in the middle of a lot of noise, an idea will come to me. It's crazy. You could be sitting in a taxi cab in the middle of New York City, and everybody's honking their horn, but inside your head you say, "Oh, a nice French horn line there." You know, I don't know. Silence is very powerful. Brahms talked a lot about silence. He said how important it was in music. And it's interesting you talk about the space between the notes. It's just sometimes some melodies just lead you. It's like
Mhm.
it's like an inevitable thing that happens. I don't know what it is. Sometimes you try to change one note and it says no. That note that it wants is the one it should be. It's hard to explain. I can't explain that part of it. That's the mystery side of it.
Are you constantly amazed at what you just described that happens to you, that you've been gifted that privilege, that skill set, that it's a gift, right? I mean,
Oh,
I
it
would be amazed all day long, like I had five,
is.
10 fingers on one hand. I would just be looking at it all day, going, "Wow, I can do
No,
this."
very fortunate when it happens. I can't, a lot of times you come up with ideas and you say, oh, that's not very good. Oh, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. A lot of times you become a harsh editor, but every now and then something just hits you in the gut and you say, okay, that's great. I can't. I don't explain it. It's like a gift. It comes from the universe somewhere and whatever. It's just wonderful when it happens. And um, sometimes you have a big sigh of relief when you finally
Yeah, I bet.
you for it for a long time.
So
But
again, it's patience in a way. You have to just wait for it. You have the skill to
yeah,
master it when it comes to you at the right time, but you have to wait for that moment for it to be right. It sounds like
I'll tell you
sometimes.
something. In films and television, you can't wait too long because of the deadlines.
Yeah.
Especially in television. It used to be, especially in the '80s and '90s, it was like every week you had to come up with something. You can't wait around too long.
Well, there are a
It's like,
lot more shows every season, right? Like 24, 22 to 24. And now it's like 8 episodes. Yeah, you had a lot more work to do.
oh
So
yeah.
I love, I was looking into this a little bit and the scientific side of it because it fascinates me how certain RPMs or certain levels, frequencies do different things to the brain.
Hmm.
And there was an article about that that said that sound never dies. Scientifically, they've proven that sound never really dies. It just becomes smaller and smaller vibrations in the
Hmm.
air.
Hmm.
And so I thought about for you, Lee. I was thinking, do you ever think about that? That somewhere out there, a note you wrote 40 years ago is still vibrating out there in the universe.
Well, I just turn on late night TV or a stream
Yeah, you don't have to look too far, do you?
too
I,
far. But the thing is, yeah, that's fascinating what you're
isn't
saying.
that?
I've never thought about that really, but I think I've always been drawn to a more classic style of writing because it stays forever. One of the problems if you write a very sort of hip score that's contemporary, in 6 months it's not contemporary anymore, because the changed. So sometimes I've always preferred to stay in a more classic mode because those things seem to go on forever.
Mhm.
But it's interesting what you mentioned. Sometimes when I'm first watching a film, a color will come to mind.
Mm,
Uh, when I first saw the movie Old Gringo, which I worked on, I saw a lot of browns and greens, blues. I mean, to me, and I translated in my head that brown meant a lot of woodwinds. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Wood. I thought, and of course, it's the period. It's the turn of the previous century, so it's that period where a lot of wood was used, and I realized that you see it in the buildings and everything. So I kind of translated that into the orchestra a little bit with a lot of woodwinds and a lot of brass. I felt that the orchestra should be wooden, so to speak, made of wood, and of course strings. But Beethoven talked about colors. He said keys make him think of different colors, and it
That's
just
called
it's
synesthesia or how do you synesthesia? I forget how you pronounce it. Where you
yeah,
see color when you hear musical notes.
right, right. Well, you can
Synesthesia.
sometimes colors can affect you. I mean, I can you might not see it, but you sort of like maybe look at a color and it might speak to you a certain way. But films have a look to them. They have a by design, some great cinematographer, they've got a look to them, and so you start responding to that. Jonathan Livingston Seagull had a lot of blues in it because it had the ocean, it had the
Hmm.
sky and ocean, a lot of blue, a lot of blue, a lot of blue. So, I found that when I developed a score out of Neil Diamond songs, that a lot of that affected my orchestration. I kind of started thinking about those colors, and you kind of you can't help but saying, okay, I want some air in the strings there because it's up in the sky, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you kind of do that instinctively anyway.
Well, I think it's fascinating, and when we, when I look at your music that you've recorded in cathedrals or stages or concert halls, those places breathe differently, right, than a sound studio or a
Absolutely.
enclosed. And
Yeah.
how does the space change for you, the way your music feels or behaves in those different
Hmm.
examples, like a cathedral or a
Yeah.
scoring stage versus a big concert hall or an audience?
If you're doing something like a big orchestral score, it's nice on a big open acoustic stage. If you were working with a small ensemble and a singer, maybe you'd like to be in a smaller room. You know what I mean? A more
Hmm.
intimate setting. Um, it used to be that you would pick the size of the studio based on what kind of music you were doing. If you're doing a nice kind of intimate track with a singer and a piano and maybe a jazz bass or something like that, you say, let's kind of all sit close together and in a living room somewhere. But when you spread that orchestra out and maybe a chorus, you say, okay, I got to have bass. I got your music needs to reverberate and
Right.
off the walls and that kind of thing. So a lot can depend on what you're doing.
Do you think that music is physical? I mean, it touches us, right? But
Yeah.
do you think it's almost a physical presence or being? How do
You
you
know,
look
I,
at music? How do you think of it?
interesting question. I've never really thought about it. To me, it's just a natural part of the universe. It's just there. It just exists. It's just part of everything. And I don't think I think of it as physical. I think of metaphysical. I sort of see it as beyond. But it's a language. It's like a
Hmm.
language that speaks to you. Um, one person likes one thing, another person likes something else. That other person says, I don't like what you're listening to. And you say, yeah, but I like what I'm listening to. So, who knows? If it speaks to you, that's your music,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter what other people think. Um, it's very hard as a composer because you get criticized a lot. One of the things I had to learn early on, I said, stop listening to the critics, pay attention to either the director or yourself. I mean, don't listen to all these people that say, oh well, it's this or it's that or it's this. You After a while, you can't listen to that anymore. You'll get yourself crazy.
Yeah. I imagine. Yeah. Just shut out that noise for sure. Well,
Kind of.
when you step away from your instruments, when you're just Lee, you're not the composer. Where do you
But
find music in your own life, and what do you like to listen to?
I listen to a lot of classical music. I really do. To me, it's just so rich and so fulfilling. I love that kind of music. I love folk music. I love folk songs, especially I love to listen to Celtic music and Scottish music and
Yeah.
Latin American music. There's some gorgeous Latin American songs. People tend to think of Latin American music as maybe just Mexican, but I say no, no. There's a whole world beyond Mexico of beautiful, absolutely beautiful music that you don't even realize is there. But if you start listening to it, you hear some extraordinary melodies and songs
Mhm.
and pieces of music. So the world is just filled with music all around, and it's amazing. You never know where you're going to find it. It's very striking. It's very, very striking. And
Is there a practice that you have that you find yourself a, a mental state or a state of being that you find yourself most receptive to the sounds and the music around you? Is there something that you do, or is it just
at a keyboard sometimes, just improvising, just playing. Sometimes I do that a lot. I'll just go sit at the keyboard and just make stuff up. And in a sense, I'm reacting to what's around me.
mhm.
I'm around me. Um, it's just every now and then I'll compose something and I'll say, okay, that's good. And then I'll get in the car and go to the market and I'll turn on the radio and I'll hear some Mozart. I say, oh, that's how you're supposed to compose. So I'll throw out what I wrote and start over again. But
You're being your own worst critic there, Lee.
yeah,
You're not
yeah.
supposed to listen to that. Um,
Actually, I make it very hard to please myself.
I will. I promise this will be my last question that deals with silence. But um, if you had to compose the sound of silence, what key would that be in,
For me, it would be C major
and why?
because there are no accidentals. It's like the purest form. It's just the white keys on the piano. It's just absolutely clean. But you could ask another composer and he'll pick something else.
I love that answer. I love that you have that answer.
Say just C major because it's just pure and out there without anything else on it.
I got to make a note here to admit to. I got to find a C major example and put that in the interview right here,
Okay. Okay.
right where I just marked it. Uh, so one of your signature works, I said in the beginning, it was my favorite TV show. I wasn't supposed to watch it. I didn't understand a word of it, but I just love the dynamic between Bruce Willis, his energy, and Sybil Shepherd. Uh, and the music had a lot to do with why I love
Well,
that show. So you did that Moonlighting with Al Jarreau, and then you've been nominated for Grammys and Emmys. You worked with Neil Diamond.
yes.
My question is, has
You
nothing to
want
do with Moonlighting. How did you meet Neil Diamond?
Well, I was introduced to him. I was doing some work as an arranger in New York City for RCA Records. They were doing a lot of different artists, and I was doing a lot of the arrangements. And one of the producers was a good friend of Neil Diamond's, and he loved Neil Diamond's songs. He had me arrange a few of them, and there was one that he thought he was just knocked out. Unbeknownst to me, he played it for Neil Diamond. And when Neil Diamond was first coming to California in 1969, he said, "Why don't we bring that kid from New York, that arranger, out here and work with us?" And that's how I came out here to work. And the first song we did was a song called "Holly Holy," where I did the strings for that, and they loved the strings, and I started doing that for him for a lot of times after that. So it was a very nice, lucky thing that happened.
You worked with Placido Domingo, Barbara
Yes,
Streisand, right? If I'm right.
yeah,
I mean,
a lot of
just what makes a
uh,
meaningful collaboration for you? Does it have to have the relationship have to have certain ingredients for it to become really
most
meaningful?
I worked. The producers often came to me and say, "I want you to do some work for me. We'll do some work on the track. I want you to do an arrangement, or I want you to add some strings." That's how a lot of that happened, and it worked out really well. And as you know, the pop music world is very diverse. Very a lot of Al Jarreau was a lot of fun to work with. He was such a consummate musician. Um, that came about because the producer of the films, he said, "I want to turn this theme into a song. What do you think?" I said, "Well, who's your favorite singer?" And he said, "Al Jarreau." I said, "Okay, let me work on that idea." And it took me a few months, but I got Al to write the lyric and to come into the studio and sing the song. And he sang it great. I love the way he sang.
Yeah.
And actually, I had listened to some Al Jarreau when I wrote the theme because I had him in mind, so to speak.
Wow.
And I was able to pull that off to get him. And he literally walked into the studio and just right on the spot, learned the melody. He had written the lyrics. He just sang it a few takes. Perfect. It was great. And the producer was flipped out because it literally was that show. That song was that show.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I said when I
It's
watched
kind
it. I mean, it was one of the characters almost. Wouldn't you agree?
it's like a playful love song, if you know what I mean. It's got this nice little kind of
It
wandering.
set the tone. It set the tone between the relationship between the two
Yeah.
of them, for sure, and nailed it. So great work there. It took me 30 years to be able to tell you this, but I loved, I loved the music. I loved the song. I loved the TV shows. Thank you for that.
Well,
Um,
that's great.
one of my favorites, I believe you worked with, is John Denver.
Yes.
I'm playing Annie's song, which is so beautiful. It's always been a favorite of mine. I play Annie's song here coming up.
Okay. Well, one of the beautiful things that happened with Annie's song, when John first played the song for me, he picked up his 12-string guitar, which, as you know, is a very difficult instrument to tune and to play because it's got those extra small strings underneath the regular strings. He played
Lee,
that
they're all difficult for me.
perfect. He played the fingering and with the descending lines, everything. He played everything. He was a wonderful guitar player. A lot of people don't realize that about him. And he sang the song. And he said to me, "What do you think you do with the song?" I pointed to the guitar and said, "We'll do that." And if you listen to the record, all I did was I added some counter lines with the strings and the instruments. They were some counterpoint. And again, I went back to my classical roots. I said, just do point to his voice. That's all. And that's what the arrangement is.
Beautiful song.
Yes, great, great song.
Okay, sitting where we're at now, Lee, you sitting in Hollywood and the business, 2025. Studios being bought up by other studios,
Yeah,
streaming,
it,
episodic episodes, fragmented audiences.
it's
What does it
not
mean? Yeah, what does it
very
mean now to write a melody that matters? Are we losing the audience, the
well.
ability to listen fully, and how did it
Yeah,
affect you as a composer?
every now and then, I was pleased to see that Game of Thrones seemed to catch people again with the theme.
Right.
People said, "Great theme." I was saying, okay, maybe that'll bring that back. Brings it back the idea of a strong theme, but it's not the same that it was. The 80s and 90s were filled with some great, great themes. Now I'm not so sure. There's some great scores, but it's a different kind of thing. It's more of a soundscape, more of a sense of sound rather than thematic. And it's just the style right now. But I think in the end, when all is said and done, the thing that people remember are the melodies. That's
Yep.
what people remember.
Mm-hmm.
That'll never change. That'll never change.
Well, Lee, I told you this was. I got a couple small questions for you. Looking back on your journey, this wonderful, beautiful journey you've been on, what piece of music or project are you most proud of? The one that most deeply reflected your motivations and your voice.
That's a very hard one. That's like asking a parent who has a lot of children, who's your favorite child?
But
I
if you get those parents alone, they'll usually tell you.
Well, I love them all. I love some more than others. There scores that I did that I feel did work out beautifully, and there are others that I say, well, maybe they didn't quite work out the way I'd hoped. You mentioned East of Eden, the miniseries. That
Mm.
the themes for that is some of my favorite. As you know, that finale theme from East of Eden, Michelle Kwan skated to it and beautifully, and David Copperfield flew to it. And it's been performed all over the world by different groups, orchestras, and chorus. It's a very majestic, very beautiful work. It's something I'm very pleased with. Certain things you say, okay, that worked out well. Others you say, well, I could have done a better job on that one. It's just the nature of the way it works.
Well, how about this then? What's the project, can you say, that excites you most right now? And are you working on anything that you're
Well,
really
I have
excited about?
I'm brewing up. I'm very superstitious. I don't talk a lot about new projects, but
Okay.
I'm very proud of a recent film, that a documentary that I did called Brothers After War. It's a very moving film. I highly recommend it.
Where can
It's
we find it?
it's streaming. It's streaming right now, and it's a
Brothers
documentary
After War?
that runs 15 years after, and the struggles that they're having and the difficulty that they go through with their lives, trying to reintegrate and become. It's a very touching film. It's a very moving. It's used a lot. The film is used a lot for seminars to help veterans. They
Okay.
show the film and they talk to them because it it shows them that you can come back. You can. It's one of the things that people don't talk about. They say thank you for your service and then that's it. Goodbye.
Right.
They don't realize that after that they've got their families. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of things that go. This film touches on that very beautifully. There's not a lot of music in it, but there is some very emotional music in the film.
Okay. So it's called Brothers After War
Yes,
documentary. And I just looked up, you can watch it on YouTube,
yes,
Amazon,
yes,
Apple, or Google. So
yeah.
YouTube, Amazon, Apple, or Google. It's called Brothers After War. Check that out. Lee Holdridge highly recommends that we'll watch it. Okay, Lee. Unfortunately, for now, not forever, we got to say goodbye. I want to
Okay.
thank you so much for being a part of our Hollywood composer series, which was brought to you by Carol Connors, our mutual friend. She's an executive producer, and connected me to Lee.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so thank you so much, Carol. And you can connect and you can listen to scores and music by Lee Holdridge at you can go to his website leeholdridge.com, facebook.com, Spotify, or Apple Music. On Facebook, his handle is Lee Holdridge Fans. His website again is leeholdridge.com, leeholdridge.com. So do that. Go there now. I wanted to say before we say goodbye, there's some exciting news to announce. Two of our friends from the show are up for a Grammy. Our friend Larry DeVoskin is under consideration for a Grammy for his song called This New Age, which he did with Al Jardine of the Beach Boys. Please take a listen on Apple Music or Spotify. And also up for a Grammy is our good friend that I just mentioned, singer and songwriter Carol Connors, for her audiobook memoir, Elvis, Rocky, and Me. Carol shares her journey from teenage singer with the Teddy Bears to Oscar-nominated songwriter, including her relationship with Elvis Presley and co-writing Gonna Fly Now from Rocky with Bill Conti. You can get the book on Amazon and look out for the documentary on the book coming out later this year. So if you know anyone who's a Grammy voter out there, or if you're a Grammy voter, and I know there are some out there listening, spread the love, please. Lee, again, it's been an absolute pleasure to go on a little bit of a journey with you. And I can hear right now, I can hear your violin whispering in the concert halls in Costa Rica under
Uh-huh.
those Hollywood studio lights and on the opera stage.
Mhm.
Here is Lee Holdridge with Annie's song, Let the Music Begin. Communicate and listen more and evolve. Everybody have a great day. Thanks again, Lee.
My pleasure. Thank you.